Hello and welcome to R&D Mathematics. Today also we are going to talk about a graphing technique. So graphing techniques, that's what we have been talking, and today reflection about axis. Now again let's C be a positive constant just for the theory part, then it's easy to. So we make it to graph reflect graph of f of x about, okay, to graph minus fx or negative fx, so negative sign in front of f of x, then what you need to do, reflect this about x-axis. And here next one, f of negative x, so now the variable is negative. Now it's reflection about y-axis. So the first one, actually you are multiplying f of x by -1, right? So -1 in front of f of x. Now here you are multiplying variable by, oh, you replace, that's a better way of saying it, replace x by -x. If that happens, you reflect it about y-axis. Now let's see some examples, then you'll understand this. Let's say f of x equal minus x squared. Now the base function is x squared, that's our base function in quadratic functions. So according to our theory part, what will happen is it will reflect about what? About, see, x-axis, because minus comes in front of, because of this minus sign. When you take base function as f of x squared, then you have minus, so it will reflect about this, and which makes sense, right? If you draw some table, you know, the famous, that's what we have been doing. So for example, 0 1 2, let's just take these values. So x squared, 0 1 and 4. Negative x squared, what you are getting is negative value of each of these values. So 0 -1. So this whole thing will be upside down, simple as that. And in order to understand the next reflection, let me take another function. So what about if I take g of x equal -x? Now at first you may be confused, you may be thinking, isn't that the case that we cannot talk about square root of negative numbers, things like that? Well, yes, of course. So, let's address that fact first. So negative x, now how do you know? X is just a variable, so what we need is this part inside, so negative x, that has to be positive. So when we simplify, when we solve this inequality, that means multiplying by a negative number, I get x. If you multiply by a negative number, sign changes, remember those things, 0. So look what happened, our domain is negative part of x-axis. Now, which makes sense according to our theory part. See, if I start with the square root of x as my base function, and let me show you in our theory part, if our x is replaced by negative x, what will happen is it will rotate, so sorry, it will reflect about y-axis, right? So here what will happen, it will reflect about y-axis. So y-axis is behaving like a mirror now, and which perfectly makes sense with our domain, finding domain as well here. See, now our domain is all negative numbers. Because of this negative sign, negative of negative, it becomes positive. I think that example Makes sense for you. Now let me go back to previous example for a while. Now here you may be thinking, previous page, this theory part. Sometimes, for example, how are you going to apply, let's say, next one, this function, it belongs to the first part of the theory because, no, let me address it in a different way. Okay, let's say f of x base function is x squared. Now, can you think of these two? These minus f of x and f of minus x. Can you think of how that apply to this function? So first part is easy. See, minus f of x is going to be here just minus x squared, right? So that will reflect upside down. That's what we did. Now f of minus x. So here you replace x by minus x, you still get the same thing. So that happens because this x squared function is an even function because it's symmetric about y-axis. And for example, if you had -3, the corresponding y value is 9, and it's same for +3 as well. So f of -3 is 9, f of +3 also 9 for this f. So these are little tricky places that I need to address. But once we learn all these techniques, ultimately we are going to combine all of them and do more transformations. And I think that's enough for today's video. So it's all about reflection. So remember, if a minus sign appears, it will reflect about x-axis. If the variable changes, it will reflect about y-axis. Let me give you some exercise as well. How about f of x negative x cubed? So the base function look like this. What do you think will happen? How do you address that? Think about that. And how about f of x equal -1/x. So the base function, see this is x cubed, the base function for 1/x looked like this. So again, with all the base functions, think about reflections, how reflections are possible about x-axis and about y-axis. When you say the word reflection, the axis is behaving like a mirror. So you know what? Some kind of drawing skills also needed here. Now let me take this example. Before I conclude, let me show you something. Without thinking too much, how do I reflect this graph, x cubed graph, about y-axis? So how do I reflect? So I want you guys to think how to reflect this about y-axis. So I'm not going to talking about the answers for this question. That's up to you. But I'm giving you some drawing tips. If you want to reflect that, guys, so sometimes drawing the original one with some dotted lines can be helpful. So the original graph looks like this. So you have to reflect that about y-axis. So forget about the lower part and just think about the upper part. And your y-axis is the mirror. So that part, see, breaking it into pieces will be easy for you. So that mirror, if y-axis is the mirror, that is the mirror image of that guy, right? And now for the other part, see, that's how you reflect. In this example, you may think that's too easy, but in the case that you may have to reflect something like that, my technique that I told you is really helpful. For example, in this figure that I drew, if you forget about the left side, see, just think about this part, and the reflection of that part is like this, and the reflection of other part is like that about y-axis. So breaking it into pieces can be really, really helpful. Okay, thank you guys.